Hey everybody, welcome back to Jeff Bull Central. We're checking out Dragon's Dogma 2 today. This came out about a month ago. I was a little slow on the uptake getting this played, but I'm really glad that I did. If you don't mind me being late to the party for a game review, I'll review it for you because I really did like this game. I'm not super well versed. By the way, I'm playing this on PS5. It's also available on Xbox Series X and S. It's also available on PC. Normally, I play these big adventure type games on Xbox, but I saw a comparison video. I think IGN did about this graphical comparison, and apparently it plays a little bit better on PlayStation. So that's why I picked PS5 for this guy. I'm not super well versed in the Dragon's Dogma universe. Granted, there's only one other game. I did play it. I do own a digital copy of that original game again for Xbox. I probably played it about 30 minutes and then stopped. This was maybe a couple years ago. Not because I didn't like it. I don't even really remember why. But Dragon's Dogma 2 is a pretty wonderful sequel. It as I understand it, and I can't speak to it directly exactly. It does a lot of the same stuff. It tells a very similar story, but it's just, it's one of those generational things. It's a generational leap forward because that original game came out on PS4, Xbox One, and now we're on Xbox Series and PS5. This game is just really, really great. It's a really great, complex, wonderful, fantasy-based melange of a lot of different types of things and some new ideas too, some actual, honest to God, unique ideas. One of the things I like about it is the bigness of a lot of the fight scenes. Mostly what you're doing is fighting small time characters, or I'd say maybe half the time. Little goblin type encounters and human encounters and stuff like that. Lizard people, those ramp up as the game goes along, by the way, as you start leveling. But I'm talking about stuff like this. This giant griffin fight scene was just so wonderful to participate in, and it happens all the time, especially the further you get in the game. And I think, as you can see here, it involves kind of a combination of monster hunting, which I'll talk about a little bit more because it owes direct lineage to the Monster Hunter series. And Shadow of the Colossus, where you actually have to use a climbing mechanic to get up the side of these monsters and wail on them from whatever position you want on their body, because that's maybe a better way to kill them because they might have some soft spot up there or something like that, right? But as far as monster hunting goes, and even camping, that's kind of a thing from the monster hunting franchise. You have to camp regularly, by the way, because night falls quick. You take a lot of damage, and if you don't camp and eat your meat and take a rest, you're going to pay for it. Oh lordy, because your health degrades to the point where you can't fill it back up. Your stamina bar degrades to the point where you can't fill it back up. So that's important. They took a lot of ideas from Monster Hunter, which is also their series. That is also a Capcom game series. And though it's a very different vibe and it has a very different purpose, Monster Hunter is more like boss battles of the video game. Every single encounter that you have is a chance to really hone in on your boss battling. And this does have a more structured classical fantasy type narrative with tons of little encounters and as well as the big ones. But I love the peculiarities of the fights, the specific nature of how these fights go down. There's some cool staggering effects and stumbling effects, and you can throw things around while also grabbing them to try to get them to pitch left or right, try to get them off their feet. You can hit them with big attacks to try to get them off their feet. You get knocked off your feet. It's the way that you use items, the way that you use magic, the way that you use swords. Every time you approach one of these big fights, it's kind of a stunning thing. And every time you beat one of these big monsters, it's a big accomplishment, or at least it feels that way, as far as video games go. And just like Monster Hunter, I'm comparing it too much to Monster Hunter, but that's only because it's a touchstone series for me. I really like Monster Hunter, and I have for kind of a while now. There's a lot of different classes, and a lot of them you don't even know exist at the beginning of the game. They kind of unlock for you as you go along. So you have basic archer and mage and warrior type class, and then there's a lot of specifications and diversifications that come off of those. But basically, what it means is whatever class that you have picked, and the game rewards you for exhausting one class and then picking up a totally different class and trying your hand with that and playing the game differently that way. Point is depending on what class you are, the gameplay changes tremendously. I chose the fighter once that became available because I like a big old sword, and I like to do me some big slow damage and be more precise than just kind of attack. That's just my style. I do get that from Monster Hunter again, not to compare it too much, but you know what? It's very much like that, and it's very much swords and sorcery. That's the other thing about it that I really love. It's a classic fantasy story with different races and different beings and different monsters, different fantasy ideas. It all really coalesces in this kind of very full, somewhat stylized, but very classic experience, kind of like Skyrim almost. Like, I know that's a bad comparison too, but if you like a fantasy game like Skyrim, if you like a fantasy game like The Witcher 3, this is a great choice. Now, I want to say something about performance, and I don't usually touch performance because I'm not really much of a the technical guy when it comes to video games. I just like the play side of it. I'm not really up on the tech as much as I'd like to be, but I'm not. Just an admittance, just a fair play. But as I understand it, there's the reason that this game has frame rate issues, especially on console. But I understand that even if you play on a really souped up PC, you're not going to avoid that. Is that there are a lot of frame rate issues, and I think, as I understand it, again, this is just my understanding, it is directly owed to the fact that they're using the Resident Evil engine, Capcom, which they developed for, I think it was Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which is now at this point a wonderful game still, but an old game. So no matter what you play this on, you're going to have frame rate dips. On console, they specify an open frame rate model. So sometimes it'll run at 60 frames a second. Most of the time it will not, and you will notice the imbalance of slowdown to moving fast. Not surprisingly, it depends on how many objects are on screen, what's going on, how open the world is, how much texture they're using. It runs good. It runs well enough to play. But if you're a frame rate stickler, because you feel that it messes with your play too much, that is going to make you a little unhappy. So there are also some notable issues with texture pop-in. There are also some notable issues with draw distance and stuff like that. As I understand it, again, it's not a hardware issue. This is a game engine issue, so it kind of matters not which system you purchase it for. But look, this is a great game. I'm not going to pretend it's not. It's a wonderful accomplishment. It's a wonderful fantasy experience. I'm going to give Dragon Dogma 2 a 9 out of 10. I'm tempted to reduce that score by 1 point to 8 out of a 10, just because of performance issues, because that really is a hang-up for a lot of people, and I get that. But for me, it was such a complete experience, wonderful fantasy-based action game. Totally should play it if you're into this type of stuff.
School. that light. Can you hear me?